John Taylor woke up early that morning like he always did. The sun was shining through his window, and the street outside was quiet. It was a peaceful day. He made himself a cup of coffee, fed his dog Max, and smiled as he looked outside. He was a simple man, kind, quiet, respectful. He didn't like trouble, and trouble never liked him. At least, that's what he thought. John had a shopping list in his hand. Milk, bread, eggs. Nothing special. He grabbed his keys, locked the door, and drove his old black car down the road to the local grocery store. He didn't know that this short trip would change everything. Inside the store, he greeted the cashier with a smile, picked up his things, and paid without any trouble. On the way back, he took a different street to avoid traffic. That's when the flashing red and blue lights appeared behind him. 2 police cars, loud sirens. Confused, John pulled over slowly, kept both hands on the steering wheel, and waited. His heart beat a little faster, but he told himself it was nothing. He had done nothing wrong. An officer stepped out quickly, hand already on his gun. "Step out of the vehicle, sir," the officer shouted. John blinked. "Excuse me, what happened?" "Out. Now." John didn't argue. He moved slowly, careful not to scare them. Another officer came behind him and grabbed his arms. "You match the description of a suspect in a robbery earlier today," one of them said. I just came from the store," John replied, confused. The officers didn't listen. They searched his pockets, opened his trunk, even checked under the seats, but they found nothing. Still, they handcuffed him and pushed him into the back of the police car. People on the street stared. A woman filmed with her phone. A child pointed. John sat in the backseat, quiet, humiliated. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just sat there, thinking, why is this happening? At the police station, things got worse. They asked him the same questions again and again. Where were you? What time? What store? Who saw you? John gave calm answers. He told them to check the cameras at the grocery store. He asked them to call the cashier, but no one listened. The officers whispered to each other behind the glass. One of them laughed. "He fits the profile," one said. "Yeah, and we need this case closed," another replied. John sat alone in the cold cell. No blanket, no food, no call allowed. His phone was taken, his wallet too. An officer opened his wallet and found something strange. A card that didn't look like a normal ID. It had strange numbers, codes. He stared at it for a few seconds, then quietly put it away without saying anything. Back in the cell, John looked up at the ceiling. A small camera blinked above him. He stared at it and gave a small smile. "They really have no idea," he whispered. Hours passed. No lawyer. No one told him what was going on. A young officer walked by and looked at him through the bars. John gave him a small nod. The officer didn't nod back. In another room, the lead officer spoke to a supervisor. "Chief, we don't have anything solid. No weapon, no cash, no proof." "Don't care," the chief said. "He fits. Make it stick." John's name was written on a report. A false statement was typed and printed. Boxes were ticked. A story was being made. A story John didn't write. At home, his mother was waiting. His phone rang, but no one answered. His dog barked at the door, waiting for the man who never came home late. Meanwhile, the officer who took John's wallet pulled the strange card out again. He read the small letters carefully. His hands shook for a moment. But he said nothing. In the cold, quiet jail cell, John lay down on the metal bench, his eyes closed, but his mind was awake. He wasn't just thinking about himself. He was thinking about something bigger, something he had been preparing for. The audience doesn't know yet who John really is, but the way he stays calm, the way he stares at that camera, the way he says nothing, but seems to know everything, it all makes you wonder, who is John Taylor, and why is he letting this happen? Inside the police station, the lights flickered slightly as Officer Mike leaned back in his chair. He looked at the screen where John Taylor's name was flashing. He didn't look happy. He looked nervous. Across the room, Officer Davis walked in holding a file. He placed it on the desk and sighed. Still nothing from forensics. No prints, No weapon, no money. Nothing connects him to the robbery. Mike scratched his head. But we already brought him in. We said he was the guy. If we let him go now, it'll look bad. Davis looked around, then lowered his voice. You remember what happened last year? That robbery case. The one with the kid who got away. Mike nodded slowly. We needed someone to blame. We gave them a name. They never asked for proof. Davis looked toward the holding cell camera. This guy's quiet. Too quiet. Not yelling, not begging. Just watching. Mike looked at him, uneasy. Maybe he's scared. No, Davis said, shaking his head. He's not scared. He's waiting. Meanwhile, in his cold jail cell, John sat with his hands on his knees. He wasn't shaking. He wasn't tired. He looked straight ahead, calm. He remembered faces, voices, movements. He had seen men like Mike and Davis before, too many times. Men who wore the badge, but used it for their own reasons. Men who cared more about numbers than truth. He wasn't surprised by how they treated him. He was just waiting for the right moment. At the same time, a young female officer named Karen stood near the evidence room. She was new, still learning. She had seen John's file and felt something wasn't right. His record was clean, no past crimes. A college graduate, a good job. A volunteer at the youth center. Why would a man like that rob a store? She looked at the sealed bag marked with John's name. Inside was his wallet. And that strange black card. She checked the log. That card wasn't listed in the evidence report. Her eyes narrowed. Why would someone leave that out? Back in the cell, John leaned back and closed his eyes. He wasn't sleeping. He was remembering. 3 years ago, he sat inside a dark room in Washington. D.C. A man in a suit had placed a file in front of him. We need someone like you, the man had said. Someone who can blend in. Someone smart. Someone invisible. John had said yes. His job wasn't normal. He didn't wear a suit. He didn't carry a badge. But he worked for the CIA. And now, he was deep inside a different kind of mission. One where the enemy didn't live in foreign lands, but wore uniforms and wrote false reports. This arrest, this moment, was part of something bigger. Back in the office, Officer Mike opened a drawer and pulled out a small envelope. He looked inside, then slid it to Davis. It's all here. A photo, fake witness statement, even a receipt we planted. Davis looked at the papers and nodded slowly. It'll do. Let's close this case, Mike said. But outside the room, Officer Karen had heard everything. She stood frozen. Her heart beat faster. She wanted to go in, say something, but fear kept her silent. In her hand, she still held the black card. She flipped it over. On the back were just 2 words, Level 6. She had no idea what it meant, but something told her she shouldn't ignore it. That night, the station grew quiet. Lights dimmed. The halls emptied. Inside the cell, John opened his eyes. He looked up at the blinking camera again. Slowly, he gave a small nod. At that exact moment, somewhere far away, an encrypted signal was sent from the camera system. It went to someone watching. A screen lit up. The man watching leaned forward and whispered to himself, "Agent Taylor has activated the protocol." Back in the station, Officer Mike laughed while drinking coffee. Another job done. Another case closed. He didn't know that someone was watching him now. Someone who didn't need a badge. Someone who didn't miss details. And someone who never forgot lies. In the next room, Officer Karen stared at the black card again. Who was this man? Why did he carry this? Why did he let himself get arrested so easily? Something about this didn't feel like an accident. It felt like a trap. And Mike and Davis had just walked into it. The day of the court hearing arrived quickly. John Taylor was led into the courtroom in handcuffs. He wore an orange jumpsuit, his face calm, his back straight. The courtroom was filled with quiet whispers. Some people watched with judgment. Others looked confused. To most, John looked like just another suspect, another man in a long list of people arrested for crimes in their city. But something didn't feel right. Even the judge seemed unsure. He looked through the file, then looked at John. Mr. Taylor, you have been accused of armed robbery, the judge said. Do you have anything to say before we begin? John didn't speak. Not yet. Behind him, Officer Mike sat with Davis, both wearing suits and pretending to look serious. Karen sat on the other side, her eyes focused only on John. She hadn't told anyone about the black card, not yet. She wanted to see what John would do. The prosecutor stood up and spoke with confidence. He read from the report, talked about the evidence found in John's car, and the witness who had identified him. Everything sounded clean. Too clean. John just sat there, quiet. Then the defense lawyer stood. He had just met John 2 hours before. The man was still confused, unsure who he was really defending. But John had told him one thing. Just give me 5 minutes. I'll handle the rest. The lawyer looked at the judge. Your Honor, before we go further, my client would like to speak for himself. The judge paused. Are you sure, Mr. Taylor? John nodded. Yes, Your Honor. I won't take long. The courtroom became silent. John stood up slowly. The guards stepped forward, but the judge raised a hand. Let him speak. John looked around the room. He looked at the judge, then the jury, then the officers, and then, finally, at Officer Mike and Officer Davis. He took a deep breath. My name is John Taylor, he said clearly, and I am not the man in your reports. The prosecutor laughed. Of course you'd say that. John didn't look at him. He continued. 2 years ago, I was recruited by a branch of the Central Intelligence Agency. My job was simple. Observe, report, and sometimes test. The courtroom was silent again. Even the air felt heavier. I've worked in war zones, tracked arms dealers, and stopped internal threats, but none of it prepared me for this. He turned toward Mike and Davis. You didn't just arrest the wrong man. You arrested someone who was sent here for you. The room erupted. People whispered loudly. The judge banged his gavel. Order, order in the court. But John wasn't done. I didn't come here by accident. I was assigned to investigate a pattern, false arrests, planted evidence, and abused power. He looked right at Officer Mike. You gave me everything I needed. You lied in the report. You created fake evidence. You followed a script you've used before. Mike's face turned red. That's a lie. John raised his voice. Do you want me to show the video? The judge looked confused. Video? John turned to his lawyer. The man opened a small tablet and handed it to the judge's clerk. Play the file, marked Eagle Watch. A screen was brought in. The video started. It showed the police station. Inside a back room, Mike and Davis were speaking. If we let him go now, it'll look bad. Mike's voice said clearly. Let's close this case. Davis replied. Everyone in the room froze. The judge stared in disbelief. Karen put her hand to her mouth. John stood calmly. Those cameras? They're not just police cameras. Some of them are connected to federal systems. Someone was watching the whole time. The judge turned to Mike and Davis. Officers, step forward now. But Mike stood up suddenly. This is a setup. 2 federal agents walked into the room. It's not a setup, one of them said. It's a mission, and you just failed it. Mike and Davis were handcuffed. The courtroom erupted again, but this time with shock and anger. The judge looked at John. Is this true? Are you really CIA? John nodded. Yes, Your Honor, and I have been for some time. The judge turned to the jury. This case is dismissed. Mr. Taylor, you are free to go. Karen stood up, still shocked. She looked at John one more time. He turned toward her, gave her a small nod, and walked out of the courtroom. Free, but not done. John Taylor sat quietly in the black car as it moved through the city streets. The driver didn't speak. The windows were dark. It felt like the world outside didn't exist. His mind wasn't calm. Not today. He had just exposed 2 corrupt officers in court. He had revealed his secret identity. The courtroom had seen a side of him that almost no one knew. But inside, John didn't feel proud. He felt something else. Heavy memories returning. The car stopped at a tall building with no name on the outside. It looked like an old bank, but it wasn't. 2 security guards opened the doors without saying a word. John walked inside and stepped into an elevator. No buttons. The elevator knew where to go. When it stopped, he entered a quiet room. A woman in a gray suit sat at a desk, typing something. "Room 9, she said without looking up. John nodded and walked down a long hallway. At the end, a door opened automatically. Inside, a man in a white shirt stood near a screen. "Agent Taylor," the man said. "We need to talk." John stepped in. "I figured." The man pointed at the screen. It showed photos, not of Mike or Davis, but of others. Faces John knew from his past. "These officers you exposed," the man said, "were only the beginning." John frowned. "There's more." "Yes, much more." The screen zoomed out. It showed a network, maps, names, files. A web of corruption. Police, judges, politicians. "You were sent in as bait, John," the man said, "and you did well. But now it's time to go deeper." John looked at the screen. One face stopped him cold. It was Captain Reynolds. A man John had trusted years ago. A man who had trained him in his early CIA days. "He's involved?" John asked slowly. The man nodded. "He's not who you think he is." John stepped back. His head hurt. Memories returned like waves. Training in deserts, missions in other countries, secret conversations, late-night calls from Reynolds. That man had once saved his life. And now, he was on the list. "Where is he?" John asked. "Last seen in Baltimore, running a private security firm. But we believe it's a front." John took a deep breath. "Then that's where I'll go." The man gave him a file. "Use caution. Reynolds is smart. He taught you everything you know." John took the file and left the room. As the door closed behind him, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: doubt. Meanwhile, across the city, Karen sat in her apartment, still trying to understand everything that had happened. She had searched John Taylor's name online, but it was like he didn't exist before a few years ago. No school records, no family, no photos. Just nothing. She looked at the black card again, the one she had found during the arrest. She opened it carefully. Inside was a tiny chip. No text, no numbers. She connected it to her secure laptop. At first, nothing happened. Then the screen went black. A voice spoke. "This device is federal property. Unauthorized access will be reported." Karen froze. Then something strange happened. A file opened automatically. It was a letter, written in simple text. "Karen, if you're reading this, it means I trusted you." Her eyes widened. "There are things you don't know about me. I didn't lie to you. I just never told you. I had to disappear for years. I had to be someone else. But I never forgot who I was before all this. One day I'll explain everything. But right now, stay safe. They'll come looking. And when they do, don't talk to anyone except me." The message ended. Karen leaned back in her chair. Her hands were shaking. She didn't know what to believe anymore. Back in Baltimore, John checked into a cheap motel under a fake name. He watched Reynolds' security firm from a distance. He saw armed guards, surveillance drones, strange-looking trucks. Something big was going on. He waited until night. Then he made his move. He climbed onto the rooftop of a nearby building. He had no backup, no safety net. Only his skills and questions. He reached for his small communication device. "Base, this is Agent Taylor. I'm going in." The voice on the other end said, "Confirmed. Be careful. This mission is off the books." John looked at the lights below. A storm was coming. But this time, he wasn't running. He was hunting. The wind was cold on the rooftop, but John Taylor didn't feel it. He moved quietly across the shadows, eyes locked on the building below. The security firm that looked normal from the outside was hiding something much darker inside. John reached a small door on the roof. Locked, of course, but not for long. He pulled out a tiny device from his jacket, placed it on the keypad, and waited. Click. The door opened. Inside was silence. No alarms, no footsteps. Just a long hallway with bright white lights and smooth metal walls. It didn't feel like a security firm. It felt like a fortress. He moved fast but careful. Down the stairs, past empty offices, then into a lower level where things changed. The lights were dim. The walls were thicker. And there were cameras everywhere. He stayed low, using old CIA tricks to stay out of view. But something didn't feel right. Too quiet. Too easy. He reached a steel door labeled Restricted, Level 7 clearance only. A voice came from behind him. "Still fast, I see." John turned slowly. A man stood there, calm and smiling. It was Captain Reynolds. Older now, gray in his beard, but the same sharp eyes. John didn't reach for his gun. Not yet. "You knew I was coming," John said. "Of course," Reynolds replied. "I trained you, remember? You leaf patterns." John frowned. "Why? Why go dark? You were one of the good ones." Reynolds' smile faded. "You still think it's about good and bad?" he asked. "You were always too idealistic." John stepped closer. "You trained me to protect people. Now you're protecting criminals." "No," Reynolds said. "I'm protecting the future." He pressed a button on his watch. The walls changed. Screens lit up, showing maps, government files, and a long list of names. "These people run the country," Reynolds said. "They control laws, media, even the CIA itself. They're not elected. They're chosen. By money." John looked at the list. Some names he recognized. Others shocked him. "You joined them," John said. "You sold out." "I adapted," Reynolds answered. "Like you should have. But instead you've exposed two pawns. Now you're a problem." John's eyes narrowed. "You set me up." Reynolds nodded. "Every step. The fake arrest. The trial. Even the moment you revealed your identity." John took a step back. "This was all a test." "No," Reynolds said quietly. "This is your end." Alarms went off. Doors locked. Lights flashed red. John ran. Bullets hit the wall behind him. He jumped over a railing, landed hard, and rolled into a storage room. He knocked out a guard and grabbed his keycard. Then, through the vents, through hallways, always one step ahead. But they were closing in. Meanwhile, Karen was driving fast. She had decoded a second message from the chip John left behind. It gave her GPS coordinates and a warning. "If I don't contact you in 12 hours, call this number." But she didn't want to wait. She reached the old factory that matched the address. Nothing looked strange from outside. But as she walked closer, a strange hum filled the air, a sound like power flowing through wires deep underground. She hid behind a dumpster watching. Then her phone buzzed. An unknown number, she answered. "Karen." It was John's voice, but it sounded weak. "I'm inside," he said. They knew. They knew everything. "I'm here," she whispered. "Tell me how to help." John didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Do you remember the story I told you once, about the garden and the secret door?" Karen nodded. "Yes, I do." "That wasn't a story," he said. "It was real. Use it." The line went dead. Karen's heart pounded. She rushed toward the building's side, found the old garden with dead plants and broken stones. Behind the last tree was a small door, nearly hidden by vines. She opened it and slipped into the dark. Inside the building, John was bleeding. He had been shot in the side. He tore a piece of his shirt to stop the bleeding. They were coming fast now, and he was out of energy. He looked at the ceiling. There were cameras there. He stared into them. "Reynolds," he said, "you think you're in control, but you're not." He pulled out a small device from his boot, a beacon. He pressed it. Outside the city, somewhere deep in the mountains, a satellite connection blinked to life. A hidden CIA backup protocol activated. And in seconds, the real watchers were alerted. In the shadows behind the building, Karen found him. She gasped when she saw the blood. "John." He smiled weakly. "Took you long enough." She pulled him up, holding tight. "We're not done yet," she said. "No," he whispered. "We're just getting started." Helicopters roared in the night sky as Karen helped John down a dark alley behind the building. The air smelled like smoke and fuel. The city didn't know it yet, but a hidden war had just started. John was bleeding badly, but his mind was still sharp. He held a tiny device in his hand, the emergency beacon. The one signal that could wake up people buried so deep in the CIA. Most agents didn't even know they existed. Karen looked at him worried. Are they coming to help us, or to clean it up? John gave a tired smile. We'll know soon. Suddenly, 3 black SUVs stopped in front of them. Men in full black gear jumped out. No badges, no names, just quiet, deadly movements. Karen stepped in front of John, ready to fight if she had to. One man raised a hand. Stand down. We're here for Taylor. John nodded. Code name: Spectre. Clearance level Omega 7. The man paused, then nodded. Confirmed. They helped John into one of the SUVs. Karen followed, still unsure if they were friends or enemies. Inside, the leader turned to John. You've kicked a hornet's nest. We've been watching that facility for months, but you just made them show their real face. John winced. You'll need proof. We already have it, the man said, showing a small chip in a plastic case. You uploaded the data before you pressed the beacon. Smart move. Karen looked at John, amazed. Even when he was bleeding and hunted, he had still outplayed them. Meanwhile, in the control room, Captain Reynolds stared at the monitors. His jaw clenched as he watched the building empty out. Files were being deleted, equipment removed, people disappearing. He knew what that meant. The Hidden Council had activated Protocol 0, burn everything. His assistant walked in, nervous. Sir, should we follow the wipe order? Reynolds didn't answer right away. He looked at one screen where John's face still showed, paused in the last camera feed. No, Reynolds said finally. Save what you can. He's going to make it public. Or the world finds out. I need leverage. But sir, just do it, he snapped. The assistant ran out. Reynolds leaned back, whispering to himself. You were always too good, John. Too honest. That's what made you dangerous. Hours later, John lay on a hospital bed inside a secure CIA bunker. His wounds were patched up, but the real damage was deeper, years of betrayal, silence, and buried secrets. Karen sat beside him, holding his hand. She had been quiet for a long time. Finally, she asked, What happens now? John looked up at the ceiling. They'll try to stop the truth, discredit me, call it fake news, call me a traitor. They'll do everything. Karen leaned closer. Then why keep going? John's eyes turned cold and sharp. Because someone has to. Just then, the door opened. The agent who had rescued them walked in. It's time. They followed him into a secure room where several high-level officials were waiting. Real ones. Not corrupted. Some were old allies of John. Some were strangers. One woman stood and said, We reviewed the data. You were right. Reynolds was part of a rogue shadow council. Deep money, deep power. You ripped the lid off. John stayed quiet. Another agent said, But this can't go public yet. If we move too fast, they'll vanish, or worse, start a war from the shadows. Karen stepped forward. Then what do we do? The woman smiled. We let John finish what he started, but this time, not alone. John raised an eyebrow. You're offering me a team. No, the woman said. We're offering you full authority. We want you to lead the operation. Across the city. Captain Reynolds walked into a dark room. A long table. Shadows sat around it. Men and women in suits, their faces cold. You said you could control Taylor, one voice said. I had him in custody, Reynolds replied. Then your court stunt gave him a platform. Another voice said, he's activated old CIA programs, ones we couldn't shut down. Reynolds looked around the room. You want him silenced. I can do it. But it won't be clean. A long pause. Then one voice said, do it anyway. Back at the bunker, John stood in front of a digital map showing dozens of names and red dots. Each one was a hidden base, a fake company, or a corrupted official. He turned to his new team. Some were agents, some were hackers, some were even former enemies who had changed sides. John said, "They tried to destroy my name, then my freedom, then my life. Now we take it all back." Karen stepped beside him ready. One of the agents asked, "What's the mission called?" John looked straight ahead. "Call it Justice Protocol." John stood alone in a small, silent room inside the bunker. The walls were covered with screens, maps, and names. Each red dot was a lie the world had accepted. Each name was someone hiding behind power and fake justice. He stared at the biggest red mark blinking on the map, Captain Reynolds. Last seen, Eastern Europe. A door opened behind him. Karen entered, holding a tablet. "We found him," she said. John turned. "He's using a fake name," she continued. "Private guards, remote estate in the mountains. No cameras, no online signals. He's hiding like a ghost." John smiled, but he'd forgot one thing. Karen tilted her head. "What?" "We hunt ghosts." 3 days later, snow covered the ground. The air was sharp and cold. Mountains surrounded the hidden house like stone guards. John, Karen, and a small strike team moved like shadows through the forest. This wasn't war. This was justice. They reached the edge of the property. Motion sensors, lasers, cameras. But John had studied all of it. He whispered, "Karen, take the east wall. Disable power. Team, follow my lead. No killing unless it's needed. We're not like them." The team nodded. Moments later, the lights in the mansion flickered out. Silence. Then, movement. John rushed forward, kicking the front door open. Inside, guards raised their weapons, but froze. They recognized him. John stepped in calm. "You work for Reynolds? You picked the wrong side." Most guards dropped their weapons and stepped back. They didn't want to fight a legend. Karen came in from the other side. Top floor. Third door. John nodded and ran upstairs. Captain Reynolds sat behind a desk, watching security feeds go black. He didn't panic. Instead, he poured himself a glass of whiskey. When John kicked open the door, Reynolds didn't even flinch. "John," he said, "I always knew you'd find me." John stepped closer. "Then you also knew this day would come." Reynolds laughed. "So what now? You arrest me, drag me in front of your new bosses? Let them pretend the system works again." John stared at him. "No, I show the world who you are." He pressed a small button on his wrist. A red light blinked. Reynolds frowned. "What's that?" "Live broadcast," John said. "Everything you say now is being sent to every news station, every truth channel, and every dark web platform." Reynolds stood up suddenly. "You fool! You'll destroy the country." "No," John cut in, "you already did. I'm just cleaning up the mess." Outside, millions of people across the world were watching. They saw Reynolds shouting, denying, then breaking. He tried to explain, then he confessed. He named names. He admitted secrets. He told how he framed innocent people, how he built fake cases, and how the council paid him to silence anyone who asked too many questions. John stayed quiet through it all, letting the world see the truth. 1 hour later, Reynolds sat in cuffs, his face pale, his voice gone. Karen stood beside John, looking at the news feeds. "People are in the streets," she said. "They're protesting, demanding full investigation. It's spreading like fire." John looked tired. "Good. Let it burn through the lies." A young agent approached. "Sir, orders from Washington. You're being asked to lead a new task force. Clean house. Make things right." John looked at Karen. She smiled. "You always wanted to fix things." He nodded slowly. "Then we do it together." Weeks later, John stood before a crowd in front of the Capitol. Cameras flashed. Reporters held their breath. He looked calm, but his voice was firm. For too long, good people suffered while evil men wore clean uniforms. But now, the truth is out, and it won't be buried again. He paused. "I wasn't just arrested. I was erased, silenced. But I survived, and now I lead not with anger, but with purpose. No more shadows. No more secret justice. We begin again." The crowd cheered. Karen stood beside him, proud. Later that night, John sat alone on a rooftop, watching the city lights. He took out an old photo, his parents, his younger self in uniform. He whispered, "I did it. I came back." Karen walked up behind him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "And we're just getting started.